Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Miami Total Football Radio, your number one Inter Miami focused podcast that provides you with all the latest news, updates, analysis, inside information, general punditry, and much, much more. We are back after a busy few days in which Inter Miami played 2 games. So this pod, we will have a lot to talk about. This pod also goes by the name of Miami Total Football Radio, and we are very happy that we have the opportunity to talk about not 1, not 2, but 3 games on this pod, because we will also be previewing the upcoming match against New York City FC at Yankee Stadium. Yes, you heard that correct. There will be a soccer game at a baseball stadium this weekend for Inter Miami. My name is Franco Panizo. I am 1/3 of your hosting team this week. Joining me are 2 other of the regular members of Miami Total Football Radio. They both now have shirts to represent the team. We're, of course, talking about Jose Armando, a.k.a. Island Jose, and Steve, and Primo Brenner. Let's start with Steve. How are you doing after a couple of days post-Barcelona friendly?
Yeah, not too bad. Sat here in my Miami Total Football Radio t-shirt. It's very, very nice. I must admit, it fits nicely. Just if anyone wants them, the merch lists are on the way, aren't they? Is that right?
Yeah. I have a box full of them, and I plan to give some away. You've already kind of shed some light into what it is. It's a pink shirt.
I wouldn't say it's... I like it.
Yeah, do you?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can imagine Gonzalo Higuain just chilling out in South Beach wearing this. Just sipping a mocha or something like that. I can see it. Why not? Why not?
I was going to say, it's not a bright shade of pink, but it's not a dark shade of pink. I think it's I don't know how to explain. It's not an electric shade of pink. It's like a normal shade of pink.
Yeah, it's nice. It's traditional pink.
And it has a Miami Total Football logo on the left part of the chest and a bigger Miami Total Football logo on the back. So we will be giving some of those away in the coming weeks on the coming pods.
Yeah, no, it was fun covering Barcelona for those 3 days. They announced Lewandowski joined up with the team in Miami, so there was an unveiling. So just like you just get an appreciation of what a big club they are and what a crazy club they must be to follow. Because €1 billion in debt, but yet just signed Lewandowski for 50 million. He spent 56 million on Rafinha. But interesting all the same.
And you were the one member of this Miami Total Football Radio team to go to his introductory photo op, because it wasn't even a press conference. Am I right?
It wasn't. I went the day before and we found out it got postponed. That was at the Barcelona Academy down in Miami Gardens. They share it with a high school. I'd never been there before, but anyway, that was cancelled. And then went down to the Conrad Hotel where the team was staying, but it was all super like a lot of security there. You had to go into like a holding pen for the media before you went in, and you went right to the top of the Conrad. And Lewandowski and Joan Laporta, who's the president of Barcelona, they announced him, and they had a few words, and that was it really. Then he buggered off. We didn't even get a chance to interview him. We were all just sweating our asses off. Everyone's shirts were dripping wet. We were absolutely soaked by the end of it. And Barcelona, then I couldn't even sit up the top. I had to file my story. I had to go downstairs, and even then, I was then said, "You're in a restricted area. Can you move over again into the main lobby?" So Barcelona completely took over the hotel, but I did my story in the end and got paid, and that's the main thing.
Well, okay. We're glad that you represented for us in a non-press conference. Jose Armando, I know you're chomping at the bit for this week's pod because we have quite a bit to sink our teeth into. But first, how are you doing? I imagine you are not as sweaty and much cooler than Steve Brenner was this week.
Definitely not, but I did enjoy covering the game. For me, it was more Inter Miami related. I did a couple stands for Honduran TV, and but it was just overall a great experience. Once again, for the first time in Dry Pink, which is something new and something to accommodate because we're used to having the big names come to South Florida, but it's usually a bigger place in Hard Rock, and it's. I think it's fresh. It's good to have a new venue, and I was happy to see the stadium full. I did wanted to see more Inter Miami jerseys. That was not the case, but still, I think overall a great experience. And now I'm moving on because Olimpia from Honduras is coming over for a friendly match on Friday, and so I keep on going with friendly matches before the Inter Miami game on Saturday. So it's an exciting week.
So everyone's very, very busy. Okay, well, this show will be very, very busy because, again, we have 3 games to talk about. But we will start with FC Barcelona and all that went into it before, during, and after, including Phil Neville saying in the pregame press conference that this was the biggest game in Inter Miami history. We will dive into whether we think that's the case or not. We will dive into the performance. And, of course, like I said before, this past weekend's victory over Charlotte FC and the upcoming match against New York City FC. So, a lot to talk about. Let's not waste any more time, and let's get to it. Okay, guys, so we will start with FC Barcelona, the opponent that Inter Miami most recently had in the Tuesday night friendly at Drive Pink Stadium in Fort Lauderdale, a sold-out Drive Pink Stadium, the first time that has happened since, well, for an Inter Miami game since the club started back in 2020. Now, before we dive into the game and the lineup and the goal scorers and everything that happened inside the green rectangle, we have to start, I think, with what was said before the game. And as I just mentioned about a minute or so ago, Phil Neville called it the biggest game in club history. He actually had said that a week or so prior. He had gotten a little bit of backlash for that, but he doubled down on Monday during the pregame press conference and said this was the biggest game in club history. He went into the reasons why he thought so, including that there'd be a lot of eyeballs around the world on it, the amount of media that was in attendance, the level of the opponent, of the club, the opposing club that was being brought in, the stature, etc., etc. I will start with Primo. Take the result aside, take the game aside that we saw, because I know we actually had a discussion about this a quick powwow there in the press conference room after Phil Neville spoke. Do you think this was the biggest game in Inter Miami history? Yes or no?
It was the most high-profile game in the history. I don't know how, it depends how you quantify the word big, doesn't it? I mean, I guess when they lost in the playoff match against that one match against Nashville, that was probably the biggest game in the history because that's the furthest they've got thus far. So, but it was definitely the most high-profile, biggest event, first sellout. I mean, that you can't discount that, and I don't think shouldn't. It's true, but yeah, from a footballing side, it's not, is it? But from a general club perspective and aspect, I guess it is.
Is Diplomatic Primo back? Because last week we had Feisty Primo. Now we've got Diplomatic Primo where he doesn't answer. But you're not answering the question. You're not answering the question directly. You just gave me a roundabout answer where you're like, "Oh, this." You sound like a politician. Was this the biggest game in Inter Miami history? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, I literally could have sworn you just said no. But okay, now you're saying yes. Okay.
It just depends, doesn't it? You can look at it for both. You can look at it both ways.
You should run. You should run for local office, brother, because I think you will get far with your non-answer answers. Why would you do that to him? No. He'll get far with his non-answer answers, and maybe he'll make.
It's always going to be a big event when a club like Barcelona, which we found out we know is very big, but even for us journalists working, you get an appreciation of what a crazy club it must be.
But that's not we're not talking about Barcelona. We're talking about whether this is the biggest game in Inter Miami history. Yes or no? I don't know what your answer is.
Because that was just the impression you get from Barcelona. Yeah, I mean it did feel like the biggest event so far, but then getting the
we're not talking about an event. We're talking about a game. Biggest game. And this is wild to me because I'm going to share this with the listeners. Primo on Monday in the press conference room was like, it's not the biggest game.
Was it the big? Okay, is it? No, was it the biggest game? No, then in that regard, no.
All right, so he's flipping back and forth like a light switch. Jose, was this the biggest game in Inter Miami's short history?
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt. They haven't faced a team not even close to Barcelona. The play-in game for me is not even a playoff game, and if that is considered to be the most important game, they did not even win that game. So they were basically competing for made-up position because it was the pandemic year. So no, that's not even part of the question. It doesn't even compare to facing Barcelona. Obviously, you missed on an opportunity with the result, but this is what I thought before the game, and I still think the same thing after the game. It's the biggest game, no doubt about it. I'm with Phil right here.
I can vouch for Jose that he did say that before the game was played. He did think this was the biggest game in team history. Primo did not. And Primo still does not, I think. But Jose, obviously, Jose still thinks it is. Okay, I said this before the game, and I reiterate it now. My opinion has not changed since Monday, just because we saw the game on Tuesday, and we saw a sold-out crowd and all the ambiance and all that. I do not think this is the most important game in club history, or excuse me, the biggest game in club history, because it doesn't mean anything. There's nothing at stake. Inter Miami, I know, Jose, we've debated about this in person. I'm sure you're going to rebuttal here. Inter Miami, by the letter of the law in MLS, technically speaking, had a playoff game in 2020. And they lost 3-0. It wasn't a good showing. But result aside, that was the biggest game to date in the club's short history. Because if they had won, they moved on to the next round of the playoffs, and they could have kept going had they won. There was something at stake there. Okay, yeah. But there was something at stake there. There was something on the line. Now, because they lost 3-0, it might be easy to dismiss it, but that was the biggest game in the 2.5 seasons that Inter Miami has had. If you want to go for a more positive game, you could go for the game before that. If you wanted to look for a positive result, if that's part of your biggest game in club history formula, it would be the game before that when they played, I believe, FC Cincinnati in that regular season finale where they had to win and get some outside results to make it into the play-in game, which is still a play-off game by MLS's standards. So
how about winning the Carolina Challenge Cup? Is that the biggest game?
No,
or the second biggest game because they were playing for a trophy, for a preseason trophy. Is that the case? Listen, the bottom line here with this situation is that Inter Miami is a young team. And so when you face Barcelona, even teams with 100 years, they haven't been able to play Barcelona. Inter Miami gets to play Barcelona in their third year. That's a big deal. Listen, if this year they make a good run in the playoffs and they win the championship, yes, that will be better. That will be higher on the list than facing Barcelona. But unfortunately, the team is off to a horrible start. So
I don't know if it's off to a horrible start. It's not a horrible start. They're not in last place in the Eastern Conference.
Are you kidding me? The expectations about Inter Miami were not for them to fight for the last.
Oh, okay. You mean as a franchise, as an organization? Okay,
yes, a franchise as a whole, they are off. They are not matching the expectations, and that's why facing Barcelona is a big deal because it's a small club. So I mean, time will tell how high they can go, and if facing Barcelona is not a big deal in 2 years, man, that'll be great. That'll be great. But as of right now.
It's not a small club profile, though, is it? It's not small. The profile of the club is not that small.
Right. But Jose, hold on. I have a question for you. And look, I respect your opinion. I respect Primo's opinion, whether I agree or disagree. And I'm not here to convince you or any listeners otherwise. I'm just sharing my opinion, but I do have a question for you and in your argument. Because I know you're a football person. You are a soccer person. Inter Miami versus Barcelona. A lot of eyeballs, a lot of butts in seats, people tuning in from all over the world. Was this game done for sporting reasons primarily, or for business reasons primarily, in your opinion?
Business reasons.
Okay, so then there's no way, in my mind, that a game that's done for business reasons, where the sporting aspect is second or third on the totem pole, where that can be the biggest game in your franchise's history. And I think, listen, Phil Neville's a great talker. And Phil Neville, as we know, gives you a good bit. Anytime you talk to Phil Neville in a press conference or in an interview, he gives you a good bit of stuff to chew on, right? Whether it's information, things to read between the lines, he gives you a good bit. I think in this situation, my personal opinion, he was just being a good soldier for Inter Miami. He was just another person trying to drum up interest and help sell the friendly that was Inter Miami versus Barcelona to the general public and talk about how important it is and how big time of a game it is. I think he was just being
he is a club,
good
he's a club
soldier.
employee though, isn't he?
100%. 100%. So I don't blame him for trying to drum up interest, because that's what this friendly was about. Clearly, it was about drumming up interest, getting people to watch it, either in the stadium or wherever they were in their homes across the world. So no problem with him trying to help create and generate a buzz. I don't agree with the statement, and I think that he could have done the same thing without delivering that message and putting himself under the microscope as he did by saying it in that way. But nonetheless, I think he was just selling the company line that this was a very important game. I don't think he actually believes that. I think, look, it's Barcelona. They'll take some things away from the experience, but they know that there's nothing at stake. He knew that. He changed the lineup almost completely at halftime. And you don't do that if it's the most important game in your club history. Was it the most watched game? Was it the game that drew the most interest from across the world? Probably. I don't have those metrics. I imagine it's probably up there somewhere, if not at the very, very top, because of the level of
Franco,
the opponent. But that doesn't make it the most important game in franchise history.
They haven't had the chance to compete for a title. I mean, they're not even close to that.
Jose, they weren't in a playoff game.
The reasoning behind this being the biggest game is because they just haven't done. I mean, this will not be the biggest game just because it's Barcelona for the rest of the time.
I didn't say it would.
It will not be the case. It will not be the case. Haven't won anything, and so that's why they're just getting started.
You don't have to win something for it to be an important game, Jose. You don't have to win. You don't have to have won it for it to be an important game, Jose. I would say this. Inter Miami versus Miami FC was a bigger game in the U.S. Open Cup this year than Inter Miami versus Barcelona, because it means something. This doesn't mean anything. But again, I'm not going to change your mind, and I don't think you're going to change mine. We can respectfully agree to disagree. I just don't think that was being honest. I think that was just a marketing talking point. But let's move on to the actual game, because otherwise we'll just argue and debate about that nonstop. Inter Miami loses 6-0. And there were 6 different goal scorers for Barcelona in this one. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in the 19th minute, Rafinha in the 25th, Ansu Fati in the 41st, Gavi in the 55th, Memphis Depay with a sick turn and finish in the 69th, and then Ousmane Dembele caps the scoring a minute later in the 70th. This was Inter Miami's starting lineup. We'll say it was a 4-2-3-1. Nick Marsman makes his first appearance since recovering from his injury. He started in goal. DeAndre Yedlin, Damian Lowe, Ame Mabika, and Kieran Gibbs comprised the back four. Your double pivot in the midfield were Victor Ulloa and Gregory. Your second line of the midfield were Bryce Duke, Alejandro Pozuelo, Indiana Vasilev, and up top starting was Gonzalo Higuain. So, quickly going back to El Primo, what is the biggest takeaway you can take, or what was the biggest takeaway you had from the game itself? The rectangle, nothing about the outside, nothing about the sold out environment or the atmosphere, just the actual field. What did you take away from this game?
The Barcelona were really, really good. Inter Miami just couldn't cope. I mean, look, you got to put into context that this was an excellent Barcelona team. Rafinha making his debut, Andreas Christensen in the back from Chelsea, Fati. They were all good. Aubameyang when he came on, Memphis Depay. I mean, they have got Frankie De Jong playing at centre half. In the second half, just was quality. Gavi was also good. I mean, they were just a level above. Just one.
Just one?
No, there were many levels above. It was like was like a Premier League team taking on a team maybe like two divisions below or something like that. Just, but I think Barcelona took the game seriously and they really played, and they just Inter Miami couldn't deal with them. They the way they held on to the ball and then they would attack so quickly. They were just way too good for them up front in midfield. They had the creativity of Rafinha, 2 assists and a goal in the first half. They were just better. I thought Inter Miami may have done better, to be fair, and at least maybe
right.
put some concise sort of attacking plays into force, but they just didn't get a sniff at all. It was completely outclassed. So it was. But still, and it was interesting, actually, DeAndre Yedlin afterwards said that the mistakes that we make in MLS were exposed even more against a team like Barcelona, and that's shown us exactly what we need to do. So, it was definitely a very steep learning curve for some of those players. Bryce Duke chase around, Sergio Busquets or Gavi or those guys. They just couldn't lay a finger on them. But it was good to see. From a Barcelona perspective, anyway.
Speaking of Barcelona perspective, before we get Jose's thoughts, there was obviously a lot of Spanish media from Spain in the press box, and one of the things we saw while we were waiting for the game to kick off, because we got there early, knowing that it would be pandemonium to get in, we saw one crack open a Modelo beer in the middle of the press box, something we don't normally see when we're covering MLS games. It's I guess that's frowned upon in MLS circles, but maybe in Spain it's culturally acceptable to crack open a beer in the press box. I don't know if it is or not, but if it's not, he just did it anyway.
And some of them actually clapped, didn't they, after one of the goals as well, which is absolutely a no. That is a red card defense in the press box, should be anyway. You don't clap goals. Yeah,
so for listeners there that might not be aware or might not be familiar with press box etiquette in the United States.
Take off the United States anywhere. It doesn't matter.
No. See, I don't agree with that, because if you go to Latin America, like the press is definitely rooting and celebrating for their team or their country.
It shouldn't happen. Period. So there you go.
Well, you're English, of course you're going to say that. And I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, but like if you go to different parts of the world,
but you're not a fan though. You're not a fan, are you? Are you a journalist? You're not a fan.
So again, we're getting sidetracked here, but for example, in Argentina, when Argentina's national team is playing a World Cup qualifier against Brazil, those Argentines are going to clap and celebrate if they see Lionel Messi score a goal. They're not going to just sit there. Like it's just culturally different. That's all. And I agree with you.
This was Barcelona. This was a club team as well, wasn't it? So it's a little bit different than the national team.
But it's a club team is still part of their community. And again, I agree with you because I was raised in the professional environment here that you shouldn't clap. But I understand why people do it, or why in their countries or in their cities, it's not seen the same way it's seen here. So anyway, all right, Jose, biggest takeaway from this game?
Well, I think the speed of the game. That Barcelona plays at a higher level, but the one thing that caught my attention is how fast they move the ball and how effective they are doing it. It's different from what we see here in MLS, because players like to run with the ball here, and they run up and down the field, and it's a physical game here, and it takes a lot. It takes a toll on the body, but it seems like Barcelona was playing a different style, and they decided, no, we're not going to run. We're going to move the ball around, and whenever they needed to counterattack, if they had an opportunity, they tried to do so, but that was not the norm throughout the full 90 minutes. So, just a different style. And I think I talked about this with you, Franco, after the game. The one thing that caught my attention on a positive, I'm going to be a positive here, on a positive side to start, it was Bryce Duke. I thought his reaction to the speed of the game, the adjustment, was a very good one from him. One of the few players that knew exactly how to react, and I thought there was just the instinct. You can tell that he's going to be a very good player, because he can adjust to that speed of play, which is something that some other of the rest of the team honestly struggle with. So obviously a bright spot, because with Bryce Duke so young with not a lot of experience, is able to adjust. to that level, then that's a very good sign for Inter Miami. And on the negative side, I guess Inter Miami, they missed a chance here, right? Because, globally, Inter Miami is David Beckham's team or the future home for Lionel Messi. Those are the two things. So you had an opportunity to show something else. I don't know, maybe that you are a good soccer team and not just the target of rumors, that you have something else other than being David Beckham's team and Lionel Messi, future team. So I think they missed that shot. They missed that shot because what they showed on the field is not good enough, and I think you can see it on the reaction, not only from Inter Miami fans, but from fans as a whole, even Barcelona fans. It's not good. It's not good.
Well, we will get there in just a moment. So my biggest takeaway goes kind of hand in hand with yours, but it's more from an Inter Miami perspective. And I was slightly surprised that Inter Miami was so uncompetitive in this game. Now, I did not expect Inter Miami to win this game, but I thought that they, in mid-season, against a team that is at the beginning of their preseason, playing in the first game of their preseason after, 2 days of practice in South Florida to start their preseason, I thought Inter Miami would have put up more of a fight, and they did not. At all. They were outshot 23-1. Lost the possession battle 66-34. That part, possession-wise, I expected Barcelona to have that, so that doesn't bother me. That doesn't surprise me. But the 23 shots to 1 and how uncompetitive the team was on the field, how effortlessly a Barcelona team that's still shaking off their summer cobwebs, their off-season cobwebs, looked against Inter Miami. And these are just friendlies, yes, and they don't mean anything. The end result doesn't mean anything. But the performance in it means a little bit more for me. And the performance Inter Miami put forth was awful. Awful. It was another dent in the team's reputation. And I wrote about that on Miami Total Football Substack. If you care to read the column, you can. It's going to be... I'm not going to touch on everything here. But I do think that it was for the short-term PR boost that they got from all the eyeballs that watched. They hurt themselves in the longer run. Because guess what? What is the impression that Spanish media that was in the press box or that was watching across the world, what's their impression of Inter Miami? That they're awful. What's the impression of all the other fans around the world that are tuning into an Inter Miami game for the first time? That Inter Miami is awful. So I think Inter Miami hurt themselves more than they helped themselves with this game because of the performance put forth. Because anytime you lose 6-0, and as a professional, that's clearly not good enough. Doesn't matter who you're playing. 6-0 is a big loss. And you could look at other friendlies that were played on Wednesday night between other MLS teams and other European clubs, and other MLS teams put up more of a fight. Some of them even won their games. And again, I'm not asking Inter Miami to beat Barcelona, but put up more of a fight, man. Put up more of a fight.
I think it was pretty competitive. All these games in the last week have been competitive. Minnesota beat Everton 4-0 last night, and then also I covered Man City on the TV against Club America. That was pretty feisty.
That finished 2-1. That finished 2-1 in Man City's favor. But this game finished 6-0.
United 6-2, didn't they? So
Primo, this game finished 6-0. 6-0. Yeah. And Inter Miami got one shot.
Bayern were 5-0 up against DC United at one point.
And they won 6-2. So at least DC United gave their fans 2 goals to cheer about.
Well, yeah.
And Inter Miami didn't. Inter Miami took one shot, and it was in the 10th.
Much better, man. They were so much better. That's exactly how much better the team is than
if you're telling me
it's Barcelona.
If you're telling me that Inter Miami can't put up a better fight than that, if that's what you're saying that is acceptable, then
I'm not saying it's acceptable. I'm saying it's understandable because it was Barcelona. Look at the team. Absolutely. They had.
Again, one team's in this. It's not like both of these teams are in equal terms. Not only in terms of the salaries that are put into the roster. We're talking about present, their current present. Inter Miami's in mid-season form. Barcelona, the players have just come back in from being on the beach, taking a break.
I mean, they look good. That just shows they're good players because they look good to me. Definitely, they look.
And Inter Miami looked bad. Inter Miami looked. Yeah. They were effortlessly danced around. They were los bailaron. Yes or no, Jose? Los bailaron. They were taken for a dance because they could not get the ball. They could not do anything with the ball when they had it. And I will say this about Barcelona. Because they came out with an intensity that I was surprised to see for a preseason game and their first preseason game. Because they came out pushing 7, 8 numbers into the box at times. They were not letting up on Inter Miami at all. They were letting them have it. They came out sniffing or looking for blood from the start, and they got it with 3 goals in the first half and then 3 goals in the second half. I think in the final, after the 6th goal, after Dembele scored, then I think you saw Barcelona take the foot off the pedal a little bit. I'm not going to say completely, but a little bit. Because then they started attacking with 3 to 4 as opposed to 6, 7, and sometimes 8. But again, I don't think Inter Miami should have won this game. I would never say Inter Miami on paper should beat Barcelona. But I thought they would have put up more of a fight. I thought you could have seen a little bit more from the team that's in mid-season form, whether they're in MLS or not. Because, again, you just touched on some of the other games. Primo, and those games were competitive. This game was not competitive, and I don't know how you can say that it was competitive with not only the scoreline but the performance.
They were trying Inter Miami. They didn't stop trying.
Okay, but that doesn't make the game competitive. The game's competitive from the run of play.
They're outclassed.
They were definitely outclassed. Jose, this is where I know you've been. Well, this is what I know you've been waiting for. This is your time to shine. Because obviously we're talking about the game, the result, etc. Does the result matter? We talked about that on the podcast, weeks ago, months ago when this friendly was announced. And you said if they get blown out, at a certain point, yes, it matters. I said, no, it does not matter. I will concede the point. I will concede the point to you that I changed my opinion. And I will say that you were right on this one. Because, and yes, it's Barcelona and whatever you want. This scoreline to me is embarrassing. If I were an Inter Miami fan, if I were an Inter Miami employee, if I were an Inter Miami player, a competitor, which is what all professional athletes are, I would be embarrassed to lose 6-0 against Barcelona. That's just me, though. That's just me. Okay, so, Jose, does the result matter? And was this game an embarrassing exhibition for the team, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you listened to the pod. I think was it in March? Or what time what was it?
No,
Maybe March.
I think it was May. I don't think it was that far back.
Yeah, May. I went back and listened, and yeah, my thoughts remained the same because at that point I said, if it's an extreme result, then it matters, and I categorized extreme as an Inter Miami win or a blowout, which is exactly what happened, and yeah, I think it matters because of the reasons that you were just talking about, right? Because unfortunately, most of the fans will think about this match years from now as a 6-0 and even forget about the performance, right? They will forget about the performance. They'll think it's 6-0, so that's enough. Don't tell me anymore. It's 6-0. And that's the way it is. That's the way it is. People around the world will see 6-0. I was doing an interview yesterday, and they asked me about Inter Miami, and they told me, are they really that bad? And so that's the sense that people are getting right now from Inter Miami, and that's why the result matters, because not everybody's going to go down into analyzing what they did and why they ended up losing by 6 goals. They're going to see the result, and that's it. And going back a little bit to what you guys were mentioning before, I thought there were 2 things that we cannot blame Inter Miami for. I thought they did put an effort. And
I'm not saying they didn't try. They tried, but it wasn't good enough. It was not good enough.
They did put an effort, and if we go through tactics, I don't think Phil could have done any better. I mean, I think he did a good job managing the game. They were just not at that level.
No, I see there, and I don't want to blame. I don't want to put it on Phil Neville, but like I think tactically, I think everything could have been better. Physically, tactically, technically, all aspects of the game. I think Inter Miami could have done better. Not much better, but I think they could have done better. If you're telling me that Inter Miami, the best they can do is a 6-0 defeat to Barcelona in a friendly, then I would.
Oh, yes.
I would disagree with that. I would disagree with that.
And let me tell you this. Inter Miami is not the only team in the world that go through the same scenario and end up losing 6-0 to Barcelona. There are so many teams in the world. There are quite a few teams that can win against Barcelona. So, listen. Again, it's a process for Inter Miami, and I think they're very far from Barcelona.
Of course, Jose. I'm not saying Inter Miami should have won this game or.
It's not completely unexpected. The only thing that you could have asked from this team is that they put out the effort and they didn't do something crazy with tactics. Being overly aggressive, for example. Playing with 3 strikers, stuff like that. Then I will blame Phil because he thought. I would say he was crazy thinking that he can win against Barcelona, and yes, losing 6-0 is on him. No, they were defensive minded. I mean, they couldn't pass.
Hold on, Jose. No, because they were defensive minded. They were defensive minded without ever being intense in their defensive proposition, because they just stayed in a block. Barely ever pressed the ball carriers, and guess what happened? Barcelona would give them time and space. They're going to knock it around. They're going to find the spaces. They're going to find the open man. They're going to make the runs into the open space, and they're just going to knock it around you as easily as they did, and they're going to carve you open, which is what happened in this one. Now, again, if
Inter Miami can press Barcelona, honestly, Franco, come on now.
They could have done a little more. They could have done a little more. They could have. Again, I don't think 6-0 is Inter Miami's best effort against Barcelona. I mean, if that's Inter Miami's best effort against Barcelona, then wow, Inter Miami is in a world of trouble. But I'll go back to the point, and before we switch to El Primo, because I do want to hear his thoughts on that. I want to emphasize something you said, and I agree with that, which is why I have changed my tune, and I do think the result matters to an extent. Because listen, anytime you compete, the result matters slightly to an extent. Slightly. No matter when you compete. Right? Might not be the most important thing, but anytime you compete, the result matters to an extent. To some level of degree. Now, Inter Miami is sanctioned. They don't have a full deck of cards. We know this because we cover the team. Inter Miami fans listening to this podcast might know that because they follow the team closely. But a lot of people that are tuning in for the very first time, be it at Drive Pink Stadium or be it across anywhere in the world, they don't know that. They just see 11 guys in pink jerseys playing poorly. And that is the impression, to reiterate the point from before, that is the impression that they will take away with them from this one. When their friends the next day were like, hey, how did Barcelona play last night? Oh, they were great, man. They were great. Oh, what about Inter Miami? Oh, they're terrible. They're terrible. They didn't offer anything. They couldn't do it. That's the perception now that some people have in their head of Inter Miami. And Inter Miami, to this point, like you said, Jose, has been a lot of talk, not a lot of walk. A lot of style, not a lot of substance. A lot of show and not a lot of go. So, this doesn't help them. This 6-0 loss, I think it's embarrassing. And I think it doesn't help them in the longer run. But, Primo, your thoughts. Was this an embarrassing result for Inter Miami?
I mean, they were just beaten by the better team, and they made wholesale changes in the second half. It was a bit embarrassing, I guess, but I mean, you can't discount the fact that Barcelona were just on a completely different level, man. Just a completely different level. That's a difference. We know that's in football terms about how good a team Inter Miami are. Middling team in MLS right now struggling to get into playoffs, and the difference in quality between that and a team like Barcelona who are going for the Champions League and the domestic title. They're just different level really. So it would have been more embarrassing if they'd gone out in the Open Cup to a USL team, or they were lost in Miami FC or something like that, 7-0. Then that's
well, that's pretty extreme to lose, an Open Cup game
yeah,
and
but
something 7-0.
Something like that. I don't think they can't be too embarrassed about losing 6-0 to that Barcelona team. They were excellent. It's just a complete on a
So you think the players in the locker room were like, all right, well, that is what it is. Like, I mean, as competitors, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Of course, they would have wanted to.
And you could see DeAndre Yedlin's face during the press conference. While Phil Neville was putting on a happy face or putting on a smile in front of the cameras, DeAndre Yedlin looked very stoic and bothered to be in the press conference room.
Well, Phil Neville also said it was a positive that it was only 6. So I mean, so maybe that gives you a nice insight into just how he was seeing it by the end of it, really.
I
more
want
of a training exercise, if anything like that, in the end.
So I want to bring up that point. I want to talk about that point here as we start to round out the thoughts on this game. Because Phil Neville, and I quoted, this is how I started my column, again, on Miami Total Football Substack, which is miamitotalfootball.substack.com. And Phil Neville said this quote in his opening post-game remarks. This was a small part of a larger comment, but I'll just give you this piece of it. Quote, "To keep it to 6-0 was probably a real positive for us," end quote. That, I was surprised he said that. It was honest because Barcelona could have scored more than 6, but I was like, man, that is a damning remark. That is a damning remark because you're saying that a positive for you, if that's your silver lining, that you didn't get blown out more than 6-0, then man, that's how bad you were on the day. And Barcelona's great. They're elite. They have a roster that is X amount times more expensive than Inter Miami, all of that. But again, we've seen other teams that have a fraction of the cost of their European opponents in other friendlies. We saw it Wednesday. We can run through a few of the results if you want. You've already touched on a couple. And those teams put up bigger fights. Orlando City put up a bigger fight. Minnesota United won its game. And again, these are preseason friendlies. There's a lot of abnormalities that go into the game between lineup wholesale changes that happen. And look, that's one of the things I will note, and I think context matters to Jose, the point that we discussed on the pod in May. I just looked it up. It was in May. When I said that I didn't think the result matters, because I thought after 25, 30 minutes, both teams, especially Inter Miami, given its crowded, congested July schedule, I thought they would start making changes after 30 minutes, and then that just impacts the whole flow of the game. Both teams stayed with the teams that they started with up until halftime. So that's a decent sample size right there. That's a decent half of football. And Inter Miami was down 3-0. Then the changes came in the second half, and Inter Miami still lost another 3-0 in the second half. So I think context matters. I do think the result matters now as opposed to because of the context of how it came. But anyway, Steve, is that a silver lining that they only lost 6-0?
I mean, I think that, as I said, I think that the thing what DeAndre Yedlin said about they were exposed even more than they were normally against MLS team gives them something to work with. So, it was a positive there, and he kept it to 6 because anything more would have been even worse, I think. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to start calling you El Alcalde, the mayor, because, man, these answers are very diplomatic. Very diplomatic. Okay.
I would say that I thought Phil Neville looked a little bit crestfallen afterwards, a little bit sort of, I think it must have been a difficult experience being sort of coaching on the sidelines and you just get so sort of marmalized like that, really. So,
on Monday when he said, he was talking, and Phil Neville said this, right? And again, maybe he overextended himself, maybe he spoke a little too much in that regard or exaggerated a little bit, but he said, when we came off the field on Saturday, we said, okay, let's go and beat Barcelona. And he said those words, let's go and beat Barcelona. I think, again, he could have downplayed it in the pregame, been like, this is going to be a good run out for our younger players, and this will be good for the fans, etc., etc. I didn't think he needed to go all out there and be like, we need to beat them, and this is the biggest game in club history, because then they go out and lose 6-0, and what he thinks, or what he said, he thinks is the biggest game in the franchise's short history. So, Jose, what were your thoughts on that comment before we switch gears to a couple more things and round out this segment?
Yeah, it got me by surprise, I must admit. I didn't expect him to say that. I mean, you can recognize
My
that.
ears perked up. Did your ears perk up?
Yeah, yeah. I think I might. I even made a face like, "What?" I was trying to hold it, but I
Same,
don't know if
same,
I
same,
was
same.
good at it. But yeah, no, I think. And listen, if you ask Phil right now, he's gonna regret probably saying that. I don't know, but yeah, I don't. I think it wasn't necessary. I think it wasn't necessary. I think he could have explained, the situation that we all saw on the field. Barcelona, they were a better team, and that's about it. We move on. But yeah, he said it, and yes, I guess we can put some sort of value into it because I mean, he's the coach. He was on the field and he played at the highest level as well. So whenever Phil says something, I mean, we should listen. I mean, we can make our own evaluation of things, but we should listen because he has the experience. But I thought it was unfortunate and unnecessary.
So I got away from my point there when I just transitioned from Primo to you. The comment I liked was when he said in the pregame press conference on Monday, you can be in awe of a player and no, you can respect a player and you can be in awe of a player. We can't be in awe of the players tomorrow. Something along those lines is what he said. And I like that because that was like, okay, we respect Barcelona. We know that they have a lot of quality, but we still know that they are, and he did say this, that they are still 11 human beings and that they still can have weaknesses. And that Inter Miami, I think, again, could have done better. This is just my opinion now. Take away Phil Neville's pregame press conference remarks. I think Inter Miami could have done better. Now, two more things to talk about. And we will round out this segment by talking about positives to take away from this match, whether it's on the field or off the field. But there were two cameos in this game not late on. One came at halftime, the other one came late on. And they were Harvey Neville and Romeo Beckham. Two players for Inter Miami 2. Now, when they come in, again, take away Inter Miami fans that might follow the second team. When fans across the world see the owner's son and the coach's son coming into the game, there's going to be, understandably, I think, shouts of nepotism. And there was that during this game and after the game. There was that perception. We follow the team a lot closer. We know that Harvey Neville and Romeo Beckham are regular starters for Inter Miami 2. Whether they're having good seasons or not, that's up for debate. But when you see Beckham and Neville take the field, is that nepotism, given that no other Inter Miami 2 players played in this game? I will go back to Primo on this one to start.
No, I mean, they've been part of the system, haven't they? So, I mean, it may look like that, but I mean, fair. I mean, if he wants to bring them on, he can bring them on. I guess they're part of the squad, aren't they? Both been playing pretty well from all accounts.
Okay, Jose, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Steve, and I think it's unfair, especially on Harvey's side, because there are things aside from the game that are preventing him from being with the first team. So essentially, he's a first team player, but just can't get the papers through and everything so that he can play. So it's a little bit unfair with him. And on Romeo, yeah, well, he played 5 minutes to start. He played 5 minutes. And the one thing for me with Romeo is that watching some of the other games, especially the America Manchester City player, America played under 20 guys in the second half as well. So, I mean, if Romeo Beckham is part of the team, then why not is he eligible to play? I mean, I think it's a matter of who he is and what the Beckham name brings with it. And so I think they earned a right to play. I mean, they're part of Inter Miami and they play. But I do agree with you, Franco, as well, that, it's about the perception. You only read in the paper, you didn't read the full story. You read the first paragraph and you take that home, then you're going to have a wrong perception about how things are going in Inter Miami. So I think there's not a big deal for the people that follow the team and for us that cover the team regularly.
So I guess I'm going to be the critical one, the annoying one. I do think that is nepotism. I do think that, especially when it comes to Romeo Beckham. A little bit more, and maybe we saw Jorge Mas's son go into the field, because there is no way, for perception or for however you want to look at it, that you put in the two sons that are related to two people in positions of power in the franchise, in the organization. Like, they can't be the only Inter Miami 2 players that are playing well this season and that deserve a chance. They needed to put in. They had Borgelin on the bench. He should have came on. They should have given an opportunity to more than just those two players. Because when you put in just those two players, absolutely it sniffs of nepotism. 100%. I agree with that 100%. And I know people might not like to hear that, because I acknowledge, I've watched some of their games. Inter Miami 2 games. I know that they're part of the team. I know that they're starting players on that team. But I wouldn't say that Romeo Beckham is one of the best players on Inter Miami 2. I wouldn't say he's in the top 2 for him to be one of the only 2 to get the opportunity to play against Barcelona. There's other players, and look, I spoke to someone today. That's very well connected, and that person said, "You think?" This is what he said to me, and I agree with him fully. He said, "You think that other players don't see that? You think that other players don't see that Romeo and Harvey are coming in when other players that are busting their butt or performing even better with Inter Miami 2, they're not getting that opportunity?" Like, that definitely impacts a locker room. Like, because, listen, soccer players, football players in general, generally speaking, not every single one, but generally speaking, they tend to be jealous. They tend to be jealous of why is that guy playing? And
every single team, man. That happens in every single team.
And even more so, Jose, even more so when it's
favorites, whether they are related or not. Coaches have favorites.
Absolutely, Jose, absolutely. But imagine now it being the coach's son and the owner's son. You think that doesn't impact players that are human beings? You don't think that impacts them when they see that on the bench, whether it's an Inter Miami 2 player or even an Inter Miami veteran on the first team? You don't think that they see that and they're like, well, so I know why he's getting in.
You're telling me that Romeo should have gotten an opportunity to play only if the other MLS Next Pro players were already on the field, because I mean, come on, it's not based on what does Romeo deserve to be on that field? Based on what?
Well, he scored the other day. He scored.
Okay, he has. So I'll give you his stats. He's got 14 games played, 13 games started. He has 1 goal and 7 assists. 7 assists is a pretty good number. But that doesn't actually just tell you the whole play. I've watched Romeo Beckham play this year. I have. I don't know if you guys have. I have. And I've never come away from a game watching him. I haven't watched every single game. I'll say that, full disclosure. I haven't watched every single game. But I've never come away being like, wow, how good was he today from the run of play. And if you want to go and dive into a stat, his season passing percentage, and he's an attacking player, is 62.4%. That's his passing completion rate. So he can whip in a good long ball. He can whip in a good long ball. Listen, my point is that I think there are other players on the second team that are just as, if not more deserving than Romeo Beckham. And that's just my opinion. And Harvey Neville, he probably has more of a shout to be in that Barcelona game. And we know that Phil Neville and Inter Miami are close to signing him to a first-team deal as soon as he gets his green card, so that he can be eligible to play without taking up an international slot. But even Harvey Neville's arrival into the Inter Miami fold back in 2021, even that had like dust or sprinkles of nepotism in it. He started training with the team out of nowhere. He was playing center midfield. He played in the preseason game. The one player that wasn't on the roster that was playing there, that was not even on the second team, and he was able to play. But anyway,
I mean, that was wrong. Harvey. I mean, we saw he had a very good preseason. Listen, if the whole Noah Allen situation,
you're talking about this year, or you're talking about last year, Jose?
No, this year.
Okay, but I'm going back to last year, Jose, when he first arrived. Because when he first arrived, right, when Phil Neville was the head coach and he was brought on board, they had a scrimmage, right? And a scrimmage that was open to the media. I can't recall if it was open to some fans. I think it might have been open to some fans, but not all. Anyway, they played the first, like, Inter Miami starting team versus Inter Miami's reserves. Not the second team. We're not talking about Inter Miami 2. It was Inter Miami's starting group of the first team against the substitutes of the first team. And Harvey Neville was the one player that wasn't rostered that was in that game. And he started and he played in the central midfield for the substitute team. He wasn't under contract. He was just there training. Why was he there training? Why did he get the opportunity to be part of that game as opposed to somebody else that's on Inter Miami 2? So this definitely reeks of nepotism. 100%. 100%.
No.
100%.
No. I think it's unfair to the players. I think, especially Harvey, I've seen it. I've seen Harvey perform, I thought Harvey deserved a spot on the roster before Noah Allen, but we already know why he didn't take the spot as a left back before Noah Allen did. But I think Harvey, if you talk about nepotism, maybe try to set both players apart, because I think he has done enough to deserve a spot. So it's unfair to put him inside or under that cloud of nepotism when he earned a spot on the field. So Romeo, I mean, you can go through so many things with him. It's maybe even a bigger name globally, but I still believe if he's a starter with MLS Next Pro, and forget about the stats, but if he's a starter or regular starter, it's the same for every single player. So I don't know. I would disagree with that.
Okay. Well, we will leave it there for that. Quick, give me just a positive from this game so that we end on a positive note. We'll start with Primo. Give me one positive, a quick positive.
Yeah, just I think coming up against that level of opposition just shows them how far they've got to come and what they've got to aspire to. I mean, that was seeing someone like Sergio Busquets, one of the best midfielders in the world, spraying the ball around, keeping it. That's what they need to do.
Jose, you gave me Bryce Duke. You thought he had a good performance or the best of the bunch, but give me one more positive from this game.
Well,
quickly. Don't drag it out.
I had Bryce Duke as my. I think that's the only positive for me, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, that's the only positive because I thought he reacted in a way that was different from the rest of the players. Maybe Gregory, right? I think he showed some personality in the middle at times. He had the one shot, so yeah, right. There you go. There's the positive.
For me,
the one shot from Gregory.
For me, the positive was Pozuelo. I thought Pozuelo was the only player on Inter Miami's entire team, the entire lineup, two lineups that were used, that could maybe hang with Barcelona. And yes, he's Spanish, so okay. But I mean, from a technical standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, and from a physical standpoint, I think he checked off the boxes from what I saw that he could play there. Bryce Duke, I thought he was involved and he tried to make things happen, especially on the defensive side. He was very engaged, but I don't think he was that sharp. I thought Pozuelo was the one that looked like he could belong on the same field to some extent. I don't think anybody else really held up in all regards. And Damian Lowe had a very, very rough moment there in the second half where he got spun by Memphis Depay. He bit on a fake, but again, it's not to single out Damian Lowe. I don't think any player aside from maybe Pozuelo could stand to really be on the same field as those Barcelona players. But anyway, we will leave it there because we've gone on for a good bit. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we will preview the game against New York City FC while also quickly recapping the match against Charlotte FC.
And I thought it was a brilliant learning experience for us all. It was difficult. We had to dig in. We had to fight. We had to accept that they were going to have a lot of possession of the ball, and really to keep it to 6-0 was probably a real positive for us. So we go again Saturday. New York City now is our most important game, but tonight was a brilliant experience for the whole of the football club, and it's a great learning experience for everyone in the team, and everyone got onto the pitch that we wanted to, got valuable experience, and they will have learnt an awful lot.
Okay guys, let's quickly recap the weekend win for Inter Miami against the expansion side Charlotte FC. Inter Miami had to come from behind after going down 2-0 in the first half to win this one. Jordi Reyna scored. Yes, he's Peruvian international, I have to note. He scored a brace, scoring in the 28th second and in the 42nd minute. But Robert Taylor brings Inter Miami back into it with a goal in the 59th minute. Gonzalo Higuain comes off the bench to score in the 72nd. And then, fellow substitute, Emerson Rodriguez scores in the 93rd minute. In stoppage time, deep into stoppage time, to give Inter Miami the late dramatic victory. This was the starting lineup Inter Miami went with. Drake Callinger in goal. Your back four were DeAndre Edlin, Damian Lowe, Ryan Saylor, Christopher McVeigh. The two midfielders that comprised that first line were Gregory and Jean Mota. The second line of the midfield was Robert Taylor, Alejandro Pozuelo, who was making his official Inter Miami debut, and Indiana Vasilev. Up top, you had Leonardo Campana. So, let's just go into some of the talking points, because diving into the game, we're already one more game removed from it. Let's just go into some of the talking points. Gonzalo Higuain scores again for the second straight match. I think he puts himself into the conversation again to potentially start. I don't know if I would start him, but I think he's in the conversation again, given that Campana has cooled off. Jose, your thoughts?
I think it was an important 3 points to start because, if we go back a little bit, and we look back at the schedule for Inter Miami, we knew that July was an important month for them. And out of back-to-back games at home, if you ended up with 1 out of 6 points, then you're in trouble, without a doubt. So it was important for them to get the 3 points. It was also, I think, that confidence booster in terms of playing at home. I think against MLS opposition, Inter Miami is doing really well at home. They just need to find a way to win on the road to make it to the playoffs, which, again, I don't think it will happen. But in terms of Higuain, I don't know. I do agree with Phil that, once he gets on a run, then he might be able to score consistently. But there's one thing, Franco, and I hate to go back to the Barcelona game, but I'm sure you recognize this as well. Once Higuain tried to help, knowing that Inter Miami didn't have the ball, he started to move back again, to the old Higuain where he wanted to be the number 10. Now it's Pozuelo there. Now Inter Miami, they do have Pozuelo, so I know he wants to help. But if he still believes the way to go for him in Inter Miami as a starter is to come down the field and try to get touches in the middle and not finish inside the box, I don't think there's a way it's going to work out for Inter Miami. And so I was a little bit worried when I saw that, but I'm assuming it's because Inter Miami didn't have the ball and you were facing Barcelona. Against MLS opposition, you need to trust Pozuelo in the middle, and if you're Higuain, stay inside the box, and then you have a chance to play an impact in the game.
So I want to touch on something that you just touched on there with Pozuelo, because this was his official, again, to reiterate, this was his official debut, his first game with the team, and he started, despite not having that many training sessions with the group. The reason why I think he stood out to me against Barcelona is because, again, physically, technically, and tactically, he checks the boxes. And I think you saw that in the game against Charlotte as well. Because el fútbol no se juega con los pies. El fútbol se juega con la cabeza. Soccer is not played with the feet. Soccer is played with your head. That is where the difference in players comes from. The decision making, the ability to read the game. I think that's why Barcelona is, you can see the difference, that they're miles better, not just because of their technical conditions or their physical conditions, just because they could read the game at a much faster and a much sharper level than Inter Miami. And I think Pozuelo was able to match that in moments when against Barcelona in the friendly on Tuesday. As for the Charlotte game, I think we saw some of that as well, because his ability to not only use his technical skills to get out of tight spots when he was dribbling by players, but it was also his ability to read the game, hit the right pass. He wasn't flawless. It wasn't like, he had a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful game. But for a first start and a first match with Inter Miami, I thought it was a good performance. And I think his ability to read the game is going to really help Inter Miami going forward, especially if he can build on this first match against Charlotte FC. So as for Higuain, I reiterate, I don't think he should start. I think he did drop back against Barcelona because the whole team, all of Inter Miami, dropped back, and I took a picture of it at one point in the first half and at one point in the second half. All 11 players of Inter Miami were in their own defensive half, while all 10 field players of Barcelona were in the same half. The only player on the other half of the field was Barcelona goalkeeper, whether it was Mark ter Stegen in the first half, and I'm blanking on who came in the second half. But regardless, Higuain, I wouldn't put him back in the starting lineup, but he may have to come back in this weekend, and that's because, as I reported on Miami Total Football Substack on Tuesday night after the game, Leonardo Campana is dealing with a right knee injury. Now, he did not dress for the game against Barcelona. He missed it completely. Images came out of him afterwards wearing a knee brace on that right knee. We asked Phil Neville today, Thursday, about Leonardo Campana's status for Saturday against New York City FC. Phil Neville tried to downplay it, tried to say it's a slight thing, but eventually, again, because I think Phil Neville always leaves you with something, he's a great talker. He said that he mentioned an MCL, so that's a ligament, which would explain the brace. Inter Miami's hopeful that Campana can train some on Friday. Whether he does or not, we don't know as of today, but I would venture to guess that Campana does not play this weekend. Even if he trains on Friday, I don't think he can play on Saturday, especially if it's an MCL injury. So, what does that leave Inter Miami with? Well, that leaves Gonzalo Higuain as the starting striker option. And I think we will see Gonzalo Higuain start this weekend. Not because of form, but rather by choice, because Inter Miami, they're down numbers. They still have Ariel Lassiter injured. We saw him today on the training field doing individual work with a physio. So still seems like he's still at least another week away. He won't play this weekend. Phil Neville ruled him out. Breck Shea he's not an attacking option, but he's also nursing an injury. Robbie Robinson's not available because of his long-term injury. So Inter Miami is down some bodies right now in the attack. Gonzalo Higuain I fully expect to start this weekend. And look, he has scored in the last 2 games off the bench. This goal that he scored against Charlotte was a great finish, another great finish. Wasn't as impressive as the one from the previous game against Philadelphia, but the way he controlled it, the way he made the diagonal run, the way he was able to control it, and then in a quick, very sudden movement, able to get the shot off and hit it to the far post. It was an impressive goal. So I think he will start on Saturday.
Give Gregor the credit as well.
Gregory, yeah. I interviewed Gregory after the game. I was the only one that interviewed Gregory after the game because he actually got 2 assists. MLS credited him for the throw-in that led to Robert Taylor's individual effort, which I know you hate. I knew you would sigh. I agree. I don't think... Gregory was even like, hey, it was a throw-in. That doesn't count. I'm like, oh, well, technically by MLS rules, it counts. So, I jokingly said to him, I was like, Pozuelo arrives, and then you start pulling the strings like a number 10 with 2 assists. We're going to have to start having debates about who the real number 10 on this roster is. He got a laugh about it. He's like, no way. But anyway, so let's switch gears. We talked about Higuain. We talked about Pozuelo. Let's talk about, quickly, 2 more players. Then we'll switch gears to NYCFC more concretely. Damian Lowe. He had another rough outing in this one. He was subbed off at halftime. Phil Neville said it was because Damian Lowe has a yellow card. This is my opinion, my sensation. This is not information. But I think Damian Lowe is playing with low confidence right now. It's just what I perceive from my seat in the press box and from watching the games back on TV. Because let's go back to the game against Orlando where he scores the own goal in stoppage time and Inter Miami loses that game. You saw his head sink. If you go back and you can remember the images on TV, you saw his head sink immediately, right? Like sometimes you see a player shout in frustration, they get upset, they're angry. Damian Lowe's head sunk. Like he was very disappointed. When the full-time whistle blew a couple minutes later, his head sunk again, and the camera panned back to him, and he looked very much the same with his head down. It looked like he was pretty distraught with the fact that he had scored an own goal, which was unlucky, but it happened. After the game, Phil Neville said that he was devastated. I think devastated was the word he used. The game that followed, Damian Lowe got beat to a header by Corey Burke against the Philadelphia Union, and that proved to be the game-winning goal. On a play that you would not normally expect Damian Lowe to get beat to an aerial ball. And then in this game against Charlotte, picks up another yellow card with a hard foul. And obviously he gets pulled at halftime there. And Phil Neville said afterwards he didn't want to risk Damian Lowe getting a red card, so that's why he pulled him out at halftime. Then against Barcelona, he obviously has that moment that I mentioned before in the last segment with Memphis Depay. So I think right now, and you could take that Barcelona play out of it because I don't think that falls into this analysis. I think that's just a moment of magic from a very talented striker against a center back that just bid on it. But I think if you analyze the other 3 games or the other 3 appearances, I think he is playing with low confidence. I think that own goal against Orlando City has really impacted him. And I'll add this anecdote. After the game against Charlotte, Inter Miami won, obviously in good spirits. He was one of the first players I saw walk out of the locker room. Now, maybe that's because he was already showered. Maybe that's because he had somewhere to be or a jersey to give to a relative. I don't know. That I don't know. But he was one of the first people I saw, well before the players started coming out of the locker room, by and large. He was one of the first players I saw come out, and he wasn't all that smiling. He didn't look all that happy. So that's just an anecdote. I can share that from being in the bowels of Drive Pink Stadium, but I think he's playing with low confidence. I don't know if you share that opinion after the own goal against Orlando City.
Well, he's an experienced player. So I think he can handle a known goal, but if that's the case, I wouldn't point directly to an own goal. I would point out maybe to his own assessment of how he's doing right now. Maybe he's playing with an injury as well. You never know. But what I do know for sure is that, he needs to turn things around quickly because he's probably the top defender in the roster. And Inter Miami cannot allow Damian Lowe to play low in confidence or to play at a low level for the next. Forget about it for the regular season. It's about the next month or so. It's a tough stretch right now for the team in terms of the schedule, and it's going to be very important if they want to keep that fight going in terms of the playoffs.
So you don't think he's low on confidence? You wouldn't chalk it up to that?
No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that as of yet. But maybe you're right.
I would listen again. I think it is because the Orlando game, he was having a good game. I thought he was one of the better players for Inter Miami in that game, in the Sunshine Classico. Then the own goal comes, and again, the image to me, and for me, it's in the details. The details are important. And I've said that to people. I say that to people in person. I'll say it on the show. To me, details are important. And his reaction to the own goal, understandable to be upset about it. But I didn't see anger. I just saw disappointment, extreme disappointment, which again is understandable. But then, Phil Neville says he's devastated, and then you see Damian Lowe in the next few games start struggling in areas where you don't necessarily see him struggle in, and that's where I think. And then he gets pulled at halftime of the Charlotte game. I think that those are signs that he's playing with low confidence. And because Phil Neville, when he pulled Damian Lowe at halftime, he had to reorganize his back line. And at that point, he put Christopher McVey, who hasn't been playing center back. He kept Ryan Saylor in there with Christopher McVey centrally, and Kieran Gibbs was brought out to the left flank. Yedlin stayed there on the right. So I do think that's. I will ask Phil Neville that next week about Lowe's confidence if it's taking a hit. it would be understandable if it did. I mean, again, he's a veteran player, but they're still human beings. Even very experienced players that play at the highest levels, like Barcelona or whatever, they take dips in confidence at times. So, last player to touch on from this one is Emerson Rodriguez. He gets his long-awaited first goal at last, and it was a bit fortuitous. He got a deflected pass in and finished it off of a deflected shot, but hey, he gets it. It's his first goal. It gives Inter Miami 3 points. After the game, he was pretty happy, but he wasn't as extensive in his post-game interview. I thought he would be very happy to talk, but it looked like he just wanted to get out of there. He was definitely smiling a lot, but it looked like he wanted to just get out of the locker room and maybe go enjoy it a little bit at home or wherever. I asked him what it would do for his confidence. He said, it will help because he's worked a very, very hard, long time for that. He said he believes it'll be the first of many to come. So just your thoughts on Emerson Rodriguez finally delivering and coming through in a moment for Inter Miami after struggling for much of this year.
Well, I think it's important for him, obviously, to get that goal. Although I don't know, I like Emerson. I like him a lot. But I mean, the goal, I think it's 50% maybe on Makun, right? Trying to clear the ball away.
Right.
I mean, he was right there. I don't want to be overly critical of the situation, but I mean, he made the effort, so he deserves credit for the goal. But I think, minutes, goals are always confidence boosters, and hopefully that's the case for Emerson, who, by the way, could become an option as a number 9 for Phil, and especially playing on the road. He could become an option. Maybe that's something that we'll see this weekend, because I doubted that Higuain can play the full 90 minutes. So even if Higuain starts, and with Ari Lassiter out of the picture as well, then maybe Emerson Rodriguez, counter-attack situation, long ball, maybe he can take advantage of that opportunity.
Well, given that you said that, you have to note, when Inter Miami made the changes in the second half, they made healthy and heavy lineup changes, Emerson Rodriguez played as the 9 in the front 3. Inter Miami switched to a 5-2-3 formation, and it was Emerson as the number 9, or occupying the striker position. So probably a good shout because Inter Miami can take a Inter Miami 2 player on the trip, whether it's Borgelin or whether it's Hundal. They could take one of them on loan, but obviously, though, I imagine Phil Neville would probably turn to Emerson Rodriguez first, given that he's already on the first team, even though it's not his natural position. Okay, Jose, quickly to preview this weekend's game against New York City FC. With that win, Inter Miami moved up to 9th place. They moved up to 9th place. They have 7 wins, 9 losses, and 4 draws. 25 points. They are 2 points shy of the 7th place spot that is currently held by FC Cincinnati in the Eastern Conference standings. New York City FC is in 2nd place of the East. 38 points, an 11 win, 4 loss, and 5 draw record. Now, before we get into any of it, we have to talk about the field, because Yankee Stadium, I'm not sure if you've ever covered a game there. I did multiple times, dozens of times during my time living in the Northeast, living in New York City. And it is first of all, if you have never seen a game, if you're an Inter Miami fan listening to this, if you've never seen a game at Yankee Stadium, like on TV for soccer, it's awful. It's awful. The sightlines are terrible. It's a baseball stadium. You're playing soccer inside a baseball pitch. It's part of the mound it overlaps with the soccer field, and it's not great. So normally Inter Miami would have already played New York City FC at Yankee Stadium, but because of the pandemic and New York City FC was playing at Red Bull Arena, it has never come to pass. It will this weekend. The field is very narrow, given the dimensions of Yankee Stadium's baseball field and how they could organize it and rearrange it to make it a soccer field. The field is very narrow. There's practically no flanks. There's practically no wings for your wingers to play through. And that will impact Inter Miami because, as we know, they're a team that likes to attack the wings and bring in crosses for the striker. Now, it helps 100%, I think, that they have Alejandro Pozuelo, someone who can give them something a little bit more centrally. But not having that wing, or not having those wings, or the ability or the space to use those wings as much, that's something Inter Miami is going to adjust for. I asked Phil Neville that today at practice or after practice, and he alluded to the fact that they will probably have to adapt And he didn't go into full detail as to what that means, but maybe we will see a different style of play or a different approach from Inter Miami in terms of how they go about trying to beat the second place team in the Eastern Conference. Jose, how do you think Inter Miami can go about that?
Oh man, it's a tough game. It's gonna be really, really tough for Inter Miami. I'm not very positive about this one. I think field conditions and dimensions, I think, might be something that could benefit Inter Miami if they're able to hold on to a draw by the 75th minute. Usually, coaches like it in the sense that you can play defense, and if you're organized, then there's not a lot of room for the team that's needing a goal. But if Inter Miami concedes early, they're going to have to open up, and it's not going to be good. So I think that could be the key, right? Stay consistent defensively, and maybe that's the way to go, right? I think if you come out of Yankee Stadium with a point, I think they'll be good, although it's not going to be easy. I mean, if you look at the stats for New York City, 39 goals scored, leading the way in the East, only 21 allowed. And if you compare that to Inter Miami, it's exactly the other way around, almost. Only 22 goals scored and 31 allowed. So, stats are not an Inter Miami side. And I don't know how's the Tati Castellanos situation as well. This could be his last game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was supposed to. It looked like his last game was going to be last weekend against the Red Bulls, and it looked like he wasn't going to be available to play in this one before he transfers to Europe. But now it looks like he will play in this weekend game. And Phil Neville jokingly said today that he hopes the transfer goes through before Saturday. But obviously, if he's on the field, it's a big plus, a big boost for New York City FC, because he's been one of the most lethal goal scorers for the past season and change, so the last 2 seasons almost. And obviously he helped them, New York City FC, win an MLS Cup last year. So yeah, that's going to be a challenge, especially for the new center back tandem that we are likely to see as far as Inter Miami goes, because again, Damian Lowe, I don't know if I mentioned this before. I think I did. If I didn't, I wanted to. Damian Lowe is suspended for this game due to yellow card accumulation. He is not the only one. Bryce Duke is as well. So those 2 players, they will be out, and that likely means that we'll see either McVeigh and Saylor in the middle, in my opinion, or we'll see that back 5. And, even though there's not a lot of space on the wings, I think that the back 5 could help limit the spaces in behind for New York City FC, and Inter Miami will look to just grind out at least a point. And just to add this detail as well, Inter Miami has trained this week, or started to on Thursday actually. They started training on a smaller field, or they put cones to make their regular practice fields appear smaller, or to designate where the flanks will be. Obviously, assistant coach Jason Kreis for Inter Miami, he coached New York City FC during their expansion season, so he's very familiar with that field. Chris Henderson will be as well, so they'll share some of that feedback, and have, I'm sure, already shared some of that feedback to Phil Neville, who, I will also add, did not sound too happy. He was very diplomatic, as El Primo was earlier on this pod, but it was pretty clear that he's not too happy about playing on a baseball field. Like it definitely rubs him the wrong way, as it rubs many coaches in MLS the wrong way. Phil Neville was a little bit more honest about the assessment of having to play on that field maybe than other MLS coaches are, which I appreciated, because it's the truth. I mean, again, I've been there to watch games and cover games. Even from a fan's perspective, not great. So if you're an Inter Miami fan going to the Big Apple, enjoy it, but obviously the sightlines will be something that your eyes and your mind's going to have to get adjusted to. So imagine players and coaches on the field, having to readjust and figure it out, because the field's on a slant too. It's not like it's straight across. It's on a slant. It's a whole mess. But nonetheless, that's what Inter Miami is faced up against this weekend. Last thing to touch on, Jose, very quickly. Obviously, in this last game against Charlotte FC, Inter Miami started off slowly yet again. They gave up a goal in 28 seconds, the fastest goal Inter Miami's ever given up in its short history. And despite playing some very good soccer, something we didn't touch on, or that we should have touched on, and we did it, they played very good soccer. And despite creating some good looks, they weren't able to find the back of the net in the first half. And that led to a talking to from Phil Neville to the team. They responded in the second half with 3 goals. So, for Inter Miami, being clinical is key. What do you think Inter Miami has to do to at least get a point? You touched on it earlier, but at least to get a point from this match.
No, I think they have to stay well organized. They have to recognize that it's not Barcelona anymore, right? So they have to compete as well. It's a different scenario, but you have to realize they are one of the top teams in the league, and you want to get some of that momentum back that you had after the Charlotte game, which is something that you put a lot of value into, especially when you have a tight schedule. So losing against Barcelona, it's good to recover as well. So it's going to be important for them to stay well organized defensively and try to at least get a point, come out with a positive sign out of the game, and then continue your regular season and do not let the Barcelona result affect you more than it's a friendly and it's bad for the brand and all the things that we have already mentioned, but don't let it affect anymore in the regular season play.
Yeah, I think being defensively sound is the key for them in this one. I think getting a draw would be very valuable if they can get it. Obviously, 3 would be incredible, but if you can get a draw against New York City FC, one of the top teams in the East, I think you take that. I think if you could offer that to Phil Neville right now, he would sign on the dotted line. He did say today that their away form for the rest of the season will likely determine whether they make it the playoffs or not. And Inter Miami does play out of their next 4, 3 away from home. So, important stretch coming up for Inter Miami. Let's leave it there, Jose. We'll come back very quickly for a Q&A, final thoughts, and we'll wrap up the show after that. Guys, very quickly, just gonna do one question for the Q&A because we've gone long. We've talked about a lot of different things on this pod. So the question comes from Preki Lives. Considering the lopsided result, would you consider the Barcelona friendly a good thing for Inter Miami or something they regret? So we've talked about this in detail, but I do like the second part of that question. Do you think, Jose, it's something Inter Miami regrets? Because we didn't necessarily answer that question.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question because there are so many things involved, right? And when you think about Inter Miami as a whole, then obviously marketing, some money came in, I'm sure. So that's good, and because of that, I don't think they will regret it. But in terms of what we like to talk about, which is football on the field stuff, I think it was not good. But I don't think in the end, as a whole, if you put everything together, I think money is going to be a very important part of the equation, and they would not regret it.
I will agree with you that I don't think, by and large, the organization, the franchise, the club will regret it. Though I do think that's misguided. Because look, if you want money, if you want to make money, then obviously there's rules and stuff in MLS, but put out a winning product. Winning games in MLS, winning trophies, being competitive there, that's what's going to get you more money in the long haul. That's just what I think. Obviously in the short term, against Barcelona, you might have gotten some coin from people that went to the game or people that saw the game, and whatever deals you worked out contractually to air and broadcast the match. But obviously, I think if you prioritize the sporting side, then obviously the economic side, of course, will also take care of itself, or it will accompany the results on the field. So I agree. I don't think they'll regret it, even though I don't think that's, I think that the focus should be more on the sporting side than the business side. But anyway, all right, let's leave it there for the Q&A session. Jose, your final thoughts. I'll give mine, and then we'll be done with the show after that.
Well, my final thought is on something that I mentioned before. Everybody knows I'm Honduran, so Friday night is La Noche Catracha in Hialeah, so I'll be there for the Miami United Olympia friendly match. I'll get to work that game, but obviously as well to enjoy. A lot of stuff going on, so if you're a soccer fan and if you're Honduran and you want to go enjoy the Honduran Heritage Night, which, by the way, Inter Miami needs to do something about it as well, because a lot of Hondurans go to Dry Pink Stadium. So, yeah, that's my final thought on just enjoying a nice Friday night. Before it's not even an Inter Miami game night, so everybody can go out and enjoy in Mylander Park, by the way. It's been a while since we have had a big game in Mylander Park, so it's a good opportunity.
Does this count as a big game?
Of course, for Miami, it's a big game. It's an international friendly.
Okay. This is the biggest game in their club history?
No, because Motagua before.
Okay. That's it. Okay. My final thought is on something that we saw earlier today at training, and that's that Matthias Pedegrini is back in town with Inter Miami. He was in the team's gear. He took part in the training session with the first team. Now, very quickly, I will just clarify, he is not eligible to play for Inter Miami. He's only here training to keep himself as sharp and as fit as possible while his future gets sorted out. There's talks about potential loan to Real Zaragoza, which Jorge Mas now is an owner of. Jairo Quinteros has also been linked with a move there. Wouldn't be surprised if that ends up coming to fruition, because Quinteros also played just like 5 minutes against Barcelona, showing how deep down the depth chart he is. But anyway, back to Pellegrini. He's back in South Florida by MLS rules because he was bought out last year. He's not eligible to play for the first team again. He'd have to be sold and then either return on a free or bought back again. So he cannot play for the first team. Don't expect to see him this weekend or at any point this season. But yes, Pellegrini, one of the first 2 signings in the club's history, is back in South Florida. So that does it for this week's show. We talked quite a bit, so thank you very much for sticking through and listening. For Steve El Primo Brenner, for Jose Armando, aka Island Jose, I am Franco Panizo. You have been listening to Miami Total Football